So our journal is a small journal, not as famous as the Journal of Bone and Joint, but we are working with them. We are learning from them. We work jointly with the journal International Orthopedics, and our aim is to produce good, reliable, and true literature. When we receive a paper, we have to be aware that the author have in mind that he produces some pertinent literature. So why do they produce literature? Usually they have some academic purposes. They want to become famous or well known in their field. They are supported sometimes by the industry. They want an academic career or a hospital career. So many purposes are in the head of an author when he starts producing literature. When a paper comes to the editor, the view is not the same. When you are an editor and you deal with papers, you want to provide your lecturers with the best papers ever. So the first thing you look at when you receive a paper, you want to have a valuable and true paper providing good information that is pleasant to read, that is elegant, that is written in good English, and that is attractive. So the medical information provided in literature must be scientific. But there are other things going on in the world. So there are information in the newspapers, practice-related, commercial informations. There are open access journals that can publish basically whatever they want. There is internet information. There is a patient perspective information. Now many blogs dealing with how a patient is suffering more or less after a surgery. And there are discussion forums. Like preparing a conference for the next meeting in Lyon, I thought this information that is completely untrue, and but it's commercial, so it's sold with the paper and the abstract, and that says that that type of reverse prosthesis is put all over the world. So that type of information, I don't want that type of information in a scientific journal. That's only commercial. So what I'm looking for, if I want to produce a good journal, is to follow the scientific truth, and for that I have to make a quality assessment. This assessment must be made by the editor by one hand, and by the peer review process and by the other hand. Both of these assessments are what we call expertise. And the algorithm for generating literature is a kind of complicated, because the author sends the paper to the editor. The editor is in relation with the publisher. They have reviewers. They work with a staff, and they all are connected to the internet. They use libraries. They have to be aware about professional ethics. They have to be aware that somewhere out there are professional writers that can act like ghostwriters, even either for helping authors or sometimes to help the editors, and all this happens in a big workflow. So controversial issues are to be related with some meetings from time to time, and that is what major journals do. So the editors and the publishers are dealing with receiving literatures. Publishing is a matter of quality and of volume also. But the scientific publication is related to truth. Evaluation, though, becomes a key, and that the most important part is the peer review process. So the editor will get in touch with the reviewers. Reviewers are very important. They are actually the most important persons. We work with about 150 reviewers at the European Journal of Orthopedics. The Journal of Bone and Joint have more than 700 reviewers. And these persons are extremely reliable and important for us. In English, a peer review a peer person is a person about the same age and about the same level of competence. So when I have a paper coming about, let's say, foot surgery, I'm not a foot expert, I would like to have the best assessment done by a guy who's proficient in foot surgery. So I will send the paper out for analysis. The reviewers decide if a paper is eligible and how this method works. The editor defines if the paper is good for the journal. Is this paper okay? It falls within the limits of what we call the specificity of the journal. Is it acceptable for the peer review? Sometimes papers are so bad that you just realize they are not good for that type of application and you send it out. So then the editor will decide who will be the person in charge to review the paper, and he will name 2 or 3 reviewers to take care of the paper. He will send and receive letters, and he will decide about a deadline for the decision. The purposes are different depending on the type of papers we receive. There are original papers, there are review papers, there are up-to-date and instructional course lecture papers. There are also descriptive papers, very interesting, about specific techniques, procedures, protocols, and so on. So the original papers can be classified, and that's not sophisticated information. It is, though, important because it will show you what type of information you are looking for. If you are looking for an original brief, you can make a critical analysis and comparative study of a specific item. A clinical study is very important because it can provide valuable information about the method or about a pathology. There are also papers that study the validity of a method in the literature, and they are important to be followed, especially in research. There are also studies about dealing with critical appraisal of a classification or a method. There are also in vitro experimental research, in vivo on animals, and of course the anatomical study on cadavera. So the research papers can be basically classified in mechanical research, that's in orthopedics, biological research, experimental research, in vitro, in vivo. The reviewer have to check first, in our vision, the method, because the most important thing that differentiates the value of a paper is the method of work. If the method is good, the study can be interesting. Clinical papers, and this part related to the level of evidence, I'm also kind of against classifying from the beginning in levels of evidence, are very important because they provide information from practice. The reviewer have to check the method and the results because as he's an expert in the field, he may be aware about how things are going with this type of study and this type of application. If the method is correct, that's a syllogism, and the method is correct, the results are fine. And if the results are fine, they can be surprising. If they are surprising, we have to check why, and if they are bringing some new information, it should be shared. Then we have to be very clear about the ethical standards, because any experiment or new method should meet some criteria in what we call human ethic research. There are also invited papers when an editor would address to a specific writer recognized for his knowledge in a field, and he will ask from him to write an instructive course or describe an operative procedure or to make a resume of some proceedings. In this case, the reviewer who will check the quality, or the editor will check the display and the quality of the study. Is it attractive? Is it nice? Is it pleasant? Then he will look at the references, and as James Scott was pointing out, each journal have different display of references, so this display is important. Once a paper accepted, the editor will define the section in which the paper will be published. It belongs to a part of the journal. He will keep correspondence with the authors and reviewers, and he decides if the paper needs modifications or rewrite or edit changes. Related to that, the evaluation is depending on the type of paper, the interest of the study, is it or not? Is it the reviewer good enough? So that's another point that we should be very, very careful. And the orientation of the journal. There are a few general orthopedic journals accepting different types of orthopedic papers, but there are also specialized journals like the Foot Surgery Journal, the Shoulder Surgery Journal, or some research. So the way of publishing is different from journal to journal, and the author have to be very careful when choosing a journal to apply for his paper. The statistics expert is another part of the evaluation, because as I understood after learning statistics, doing good statistics is not easy. So sometimes we hire a statistician to do the work, and statistician may be expensive. Good statistics study may need lots of money, and sometimes the results are biased because the statistician is not good enough, or he is not dealing with the proper data. Sometimes statisticians do not understand exactly what you want from them in terms of clinical evidence, and they can display wrong data. So having a good interconnectivity between the surgeon, who's the author, and the statistician is a key for good publishing. So for us, in our journal, we try to diversify the reviewing. One or two reviewers sometimes are not enough, so we have to address sometimes to a specialist in a statistics part, or to rewrite valuable papers because information should be brought to the readers. But as a result, only rich journals who have the funding necessary to produce pertinent literature can address to this type of application, because there is a budget going on with that. So that's another issue that should be very interesting. The literature search also is important, because that can keep us away from fraud. There was a very interesting paper, an article actually, that was published by a journal. Everybody knows that, the Wall Street Journal. So the Wall Street Journal in March this year published a brief saying that the number of fraud in scientific publication is grown very, very impressively. It was about 170 papers between 2001 and 2005, and it's almost 700 and something now. So that means that fraud, duplicity, using a ghostwriting, salami slicing, and other types of fraud that can be used to get somehow a publication are there, and we have to be very aware of these occurrences. In order to avoid that, we have to be sure that we make a good appraisal and a good research for the data published. And finally, the notoriety of a paper, if you publish a good paper, is related to the journal, to the author, to the public of the journal. Who reads that? Who will reproduce your information? To the impact and citation, and at least to the paper intrinsic value. That is why evaluation of a paper is key. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Marius. A nice summary of events.